Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, licensed attorney, crisis strategist, and host of The Crisis Files. I am always looking at the controversies of the day and trying to bring solutions to you, along with problem solvers from around the world. Today, that person is Darby Duffin. He's a content creator specializing in short and long form productions through his company On a Mission Media. His past life includes 5 years as FEMA as a spokesperson on crises such as Hurricane Katrina. Darby is just the person to talk about a hot topic for decades: ocean fishing. His award-winning film, Fish and Men, The High Cost of Cheap Fish, is a startling narrative packed with pounds of fish, shocking stats, and human stories that will make you want to buy directly from fisher people. He's here for the case file I call Fishy Business. Darby, I am guessing many Americans would be stunned to learn that the U.S. imports 91% of our seafood, even though we could feed ourselves.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Roshini. And absolutely, that 91% figure is exactly what you said. It is stunning when you consider how much coastline the United States has, how many fishing ports we have, a long storied history of fishing and feeding ourselves from the ocean. It makes you wonder how that ever came to be. It was one of those statistics that got me interested in making the film to begin with. I was living on a coastal town in New England, and short ways from Boston and from Gloucester, where we focused a lot of the film on. And in my own personal experience, going into a seafood market where I thought I could get local seafood, and you could literally see boats, the fishing boats behind this market, and seeing really mostly just imported seafood. So that kind of began the journey of figuring out, just how bad it was, and if I'm seeing this here, what it must look like across the country. And so that 91% is a startling reality. The other side to that is that only 1% of our seafood that is imported is actually inspected. So we get into that into the film. So here you have 91%, these billions of pounds of seafood coming into the country. It's managed by the FDA in terms of the oversight for inspection of the seafood, and only 1% of that is inspected. And here's the real thing to that is, of that 1% that's actually inspected, 50% of it is rejected, meaning it doesn't meet standards for our health standards set by the FDA. So
really we're eating a lot of dirty fish. I mean, that's what it comes down to, because in only 1% of the 91% that comes in, only 1% of that is even inspected, half of it rejected. So we can only imagine how much of it should be rejected. All right, so you were living in this coastal town, you were seeing a discrepancy, and this is what filmmakers do, right? You start asking why. Yeah. And that led you to focus on the town of Gloucester, Massachusetts, which is this cute, the visuals that you got of Gloucester in your movie Fish and Men, just beautiful. The film is worth a watch just for that alone. But you met these characters, these really rugged families, men and women. You have voices of men and women in this film, which is great, whether they're educators, authors, chefs, or fisher people. And they really bring us this industry. I was stunned as someone who went to college in Boston, Mass. I did not know the story of Gloucester, nor did I understand the story of the regular fisher person in all parts of the coastal cities of the United States, Darby.
Yeah, it's a storied history. Anybody that's ever seen the George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg film, A Perfect Storm, that's where it takes place. Gloucester is the oldest fishing port in the United States. It's over 400 years old. It has a very proud history still to this day. The fishing industry is, it's the very lifeblood of that community. It's their identity. Um, and though it's greatly diminished today in terms of its size and influence, it's still there. Everyone's familiar with the Gorton's fisherman, and can probably remember some of those commercials from back in the day. But that is also located in Gloucester. We get into that there because it is sort of a mirage about. It makes you think that the industry is alive and well in Gloucester, but actually, it's even the things coming in through the Gorton's um, location in Gloucester is all imported. And so, what you have is this great demand for seafood in the United States, but the inability for us to provide that demand. And it gets complex, but in terms of the fishing industry, what we get into is what these guys are facing as a business, and why that it's so challenging for them to survive, through whether it's regulations or competing with cheaper imported seafood. Um, it's all of that. And then ultimately, it's the seafood consumer, you and I, that, if unaware, we're not even asking where our seafood is coming from. So that was really a primary goal for the film, was to educate people on the people of Gloucester and all fishermen and around the country, and it's very diverse fishing ports. What they do, the risks that they take, both economically and the risks to their own lives to feed us, the seafood that we love from the sea. Um, at the same time, all the challenges that they have, and then there'd be more of an awareness about, yeah, I want to know more about where my seafood comes from, because I know that the guys in Gloucester and and other ports around the country, that they're providing us with this great product. But yet, when I go to a seafood restaurant, I'm not really sure where it's from. Is it, so that's one of the questions that we raise.
Let's talk about conservation for a moment, because one of the Fisher women made the comment that Fisher people are some of the best environmentalists around. And another startling stat is that 85% of U.S. seafood consumption is only 5 fish. That's amazing and unnecessary based on what we learn in this film and what people who know fish and know seafood. There are, probably unlimited different species that we could be consuming, and in that way then not overfish the oceans and the seas.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So one of the characters that we feature in the film is an author by the name of Paul Greenberg, who's written several books, New York Times bestseller books, about seafood, about our rich history and tradition of fishing in this country. And then when it comes to the consumer, he refers to us as Americans and as lazy seafood eaters. And I think he's right, because the statistic that you bring up, this 85%, is proof of that. In other words, if we're only willing to eat a handful of things from the sea, and as you point out, up in a net of a fishing boat, comes all this great variety of wonderful edible seafood. But we're not familiar with it, and so we're not really willing to eat it.
Let's talk about that term, the bycatch,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
The fish we're not willing to eat. I did not even know about that term until I watched Fish and Men. But
yeah.
the bycatch, those aren't bad fish. Those are very edible fish.
Yeah. So, and typically, and just to be really like succinct on this, in the net, how the fish is caught in a variety of species of fish come up in a net, even though they might be targeting the fish that is prized and, most profitable to them, cod or haddock. But they're pulling up a variety of these other fish, similar to cod and haddock, fish that could be hake or pollock, fish that we're not familiar with, but taste just as great. The problem is that we as consumers are not familiar with that, and so we're not willing to pay for it. And so they don't demand. So it's not as profitable for the fishermen because there's no market for it. So short of this mass education on these other species that are more plentiful and maybe not is reduced in number, they're not as targeted. It gives it for conservation reasons. It would give the more targeted fish like cod and haddock a chance
To
to
rebirth
rebound.
and yeah, rebound is the right word. Absolutely. I know there's some movements that are going on that people might not be aware of. Some of them very much advocated by these restaurateurs, chef owners around the country, whether you're talking LA, New York, Minneapolis, all of these restaurant scenes, New Orleans, that are scenes, and they want to be, what we know in the Midwest where I'm living, farm to table. There's really that sea to dock to restaurant kind of ethos that I don't think gets as much coverage as some of the traditional agriculture that's crop based, Darby. So maybe you can give people a sense of the fisher people deserve that same recognition, respect, and advocacy that the agriculture industry that the farmers get.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true. I think it is because we're just so familiar with the American farmer, this icon, and it's easier to see. We most of us are not privy to all the challenges and the realities of what it takes to actually go out to sea and and catch the fish that we want to eat. I just want to go back real quick to a second. You talked about the five species that we eat. And I think it's important for people to realize that most of these come from places and are where we can't, where the health of the quality, I should say, the quality
And
of
what
that.
are those seafood that are those top five? Just to
Yeah.
give people a sense of that.
Yeah. So the top five would be, and these are mostly farmed. The number one most popular seafood in America is no surprise is shrimp, but the Gulf Coast, only supplies like a small percentage of that, 5 to 10% of the huge demand that we have in the country for shrimp. And so most of that is imported. Most of that is farm raised that is imported. And we get into it in the quality, in the conditions that of which these shrimp are farm raised is not great. And so
I mean, it's very vivid in the film. It's pretty
yeah, and
disgusting.
we'll get into that. But the other species are well, I think the second most is canned tuna. Then you have salmon, most of which is farm raised. I mean, wild sockeye salmon is beautiful, but most of the salmon that we consume is farm raised. Again, that has some issues to it as well, health wise. And then there is tilapia, of course, which we poke a little bit of fun at in the film, similar to shrimp, but questionable conditions and how it's raised. And then there's pollock, which is a healthy generic whitefish that you would that is caught in Alaska primarily. So, but back to your point about sort of the respect to the trade itself. We I think that you learn that when you see in the film and you understand what all the challenges that they have to overcome in order to continuing doing the thing that they love, which is providing us with this really high quality food that we enjoy. I think what you see through the film is an understanding and appreciation for what they do. And we introduced the chefs into the film to try to hopefully educate people on what we were discussing about earlier, which is the fact that there's all this incredible seafood that is delicious that we just are less familiar with, and they sort of remove the barrier, the resistance that we might have to trying something
By
that
serving it in their restaurants, by
yeah
advocating, making it the special of the day or things like that.
yeah
Yeah, which is wonderful. And that's what I hope that we can grow more of. What I really want to understand, Darby, and you can help us, is this film was made a few years ago. The problems persist, but has the fishing industry been able to break through it at all to the regulatory bodies? Because the fact that we import 91% of the fish in the United States and we don't need to, what movement has been made to fish, demand for the other kind of fish, to both buy the other kind of fish from local fisher people, as well as make it very well known that we're going to start to stretch out, not just have 5 main fish that we eat in the United States. Let's shoot for 20, or more, because there are so many species of fish that are edible.
Yeah. Well, from a public policy standpoint, there has been, attempts to do a few things. One, to, incentivize and the industry to educate people, first of all, on what is available. The other is some regulatory ease on making the restrictions on the fishermen themselves less burdensome, without compromising the ecology itself and the risk of trying to balance the stocks, which the government is there to manage. But I would say it's been slow because ultimately it's a grassroots movement where people themselves have to become more aware and care enough to, we say is ask where your seafood comes from and want to know, and then really want to support this industry, want to support the people, your neighbors, people that are local to you in your region that are providing you with the seafood that you want to enjoy.
So find out what's out there, whether you're near lakes or you're near ocean or sea or gulfs. Find out what are these kinds of products that come from the water and demand it. One thing that I do want to introduce before we say goodbye, Darby, is the notion of school-age kids eating this fresh fish. And you featured a company that has outposts around the United States that is buying directly at the waterfront, at the docks. It's so beautiful to see. And they're bringing all that seafood, hundreds of pounds a day, to various school districts around the United States. What else can you tell us about that? And is that movement growing?
Yeah, so that's an organization called Dock to Dish, and it was founded by a former fisherman in Long Island. And as you mentioned, he's made contact and working with some of the greatest, well-known chefs in the world that we feature in the film, both in New York and Los Angeles and some other coastal communities. It's made a big difference, I think, in terms of spreading awareness. There's still a lot of education to be done, and so I even though we made the film a few years ago, I think a lot of the issues, as you say, still persist, because there's a lot of noise to get through in order to educate people on the basics, and just wanting and to ask, first of all, where their seafood comes from, and it's not always the most transparent. It's not always the most transparent and evident thing when you go out to a restaurant, because that's where most people encounter seafood. Most people are not. I think it's 85% of people, of all the seafood consumed in the country, is eaten in restaurants. So it's more of the education about where did this fish come from, and if you find out that there's a local option versus something that's imported and it's got 20,000 seafood miles on it, then maybe you should think about how you can support by taking the local option. And I think
right. I mean, it was amazing, some of the graphics that you showed us, where just someone in a restaurant in Gloucester was looking at the water, and the fish they were eating in that restaurant had flown in from somewhere else, or maybe even was caught nearby, but packaged somewhere else and then flown back. I mean, it's just crazy. So not fresh at all. Well, yeah. Darby, we on the Crisis Files are happy to take up the cause of the fish. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Scorpio, which is a water sign. I'm saying that because you are really trying to help an industry that needs all Americans and all global citizens to get involved. Thank you for bringing this topic to a higher level of awareness for us. To find out more, go to fishandmen.com. You can also view this film on Apple TV or Amazon Prime, and I urge you to watch it. I could not look away. I watched it in one sitting. It was about 85 minutes, and it was well worth it. Beautifully shot, beautifully done. So as a filmmaker, a filmmaker, I really applaud you for your filmmaking talents, because not all documentaries are as enjoyable. It was not clunky at all, Darby. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much for having me, and enjoy the conversation.
Thank you. Today's case file is powered by Goff Public. Reputation issues can arise quickly and unexpectedly. Prepare and plan before crisis strikes with Goff Public, an award-winning public relations and public affairs agency. Your best defense is a crisis-ready culture that helps you spot potential issues, act swiftly, and reflects your brand's values while building trust with your audiences. Learn more at goffpublic.com. Follow the show on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Check out our website, thecrisisfiles.com, to catch up on all case files and to share ideas for future case files. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.